formulas that suggest that what we're leading to in this world government is that the people's ability to self-determinate will be diminished by the depth and the width of the new structure. For example, if their world court is going to be in Hague and I've got a violation I'm alleging, then I have to have the $1,500 to get a plane ticket to file the. If law was fair, we don't even want to start trying to qualify law because there is no law to protect a black man from a white man with a mission. There has never been a law that they ever respected that will allow us to put any amount of credibility or believability. And we're not going to sleep through that part.
Right.
But we're alluding to the fact that they're using these things to develop or transform. For example, if we're going to move into a world government, then we must have a world law. Well, where does world law come in? They decided that, well, we couldn't get it all at once, so we'll do it in a piecemeal fashion. So they went and they developed under the United Nations auspices something called the Law of Sea Conference, which was an international set of laws that would govern how each country would run or relate to the use of the waters. Then they came with the Law of the Air Conference, which allowed them to differentiate which rights each country had over the air that stood above their particular sovereignties. In other forms, we look at the United Nations, a body, a world body of nations represented under the auspices of a set of rules. We know that this was started in 1944 after World War II, which we remember that after World War I, they had tried to establish something called the League of Nations. But at that time, this new superstructure didn't work. So they went back and retooled and reworked at this navigational plan, and they came back in the 40s with World War II and the United Nations, which was endowed by the Rockefeller family, who gave them the land, helped instrument the first group of those, which met, I believe, in San Francisco and signed an agreement that allowed the beginning of this world formula to develop. And these United Nations represent symbolically something coming up ahead. But every time we appeal to this thing, it never works. When Nicaragua was being bombed by the CIA in the mines, and they went to the World Court and United Nations to be protected by the rule of war, they said, no, we're after Ortega. There is no law we'll respect in trying to stop us from taking Nicaragua from the Nicaraguans, even though they had overthrown a dictator called Somoza, who America supported. Then you got another situation where you evade Panama. Here's world law. There's a world law, but they go right in and take a country because they say they're having a domestic dispute and they want to throw Noriega out. They want to put Indara in, a light-skinned Panamanian who was sworn in at a military base with not one single Panamanian present.
Sort of like a world police.
Because to have world law, you must have world police. And let me just add to that, that's also symbolic with the United Nations peacekeeping forces, which are used, the United Nations peacekeeping forces are used to police nations. And soon more power will be deposited in these policekeeping forces, which when I walk around Los Angeles and I look at some of the things that are happening here in the local area, it looks like we're being prepped here for a police state, a more overt one, in preparation for the world police state. Many people saw 1984 and Big Brother and don't even understand how it relates to what they're doing today.
Now, just if I could digress just for a moment, if there's going to be a world court and a world police, what would be the mechanism for facilitating that? And by that, I mean this. What would be a process that they could come up with, such as they could centralize the economies of the world? That would mean that there would have to be a central bank here in the United States. There had to be a central banks throughout all of Europe. And, could you shed some light on that aspect?
I think that's a great question, because what you're doing is you're peeling the orange. And by peeling the orange, you're getting to the meat of the matter. If there is going to be also a world government and a world law and a world police unit, then there must be a world centralized currency. What we're witnessing in Europe with the uniting of Western Europe in 1992, which looks like by 1992 will unite all of Europe, West and East, so-called East. We're seeing that they're coming up with an EU or a European currency that will be uniform, such that you could go from Germany to France without having to worry about the level of the German mark versus how much you get for the French whatever, which means that this uniform currency, which had been looked at in a conference at Harvard called the Bretton Woods II conference. You see, the money system we have now was established at a conference called Bretton Woods One, which was done at the United Nations in 44, when they set up this economy based on a dude named William Keyes. Now, subsequent to that, they found that this economy became obsolete because it had to have a component that allowed it to unify the nations of the world under a monetary component that was controllable by the secret society. So they started in a piecemeal fashion to begin to come up with centralized currencies in various segments of the world, which would then culminate in a centralized currency. Now, one of the ways they had to do this was a central banking system. If you go back and look at the origination of central banking systems, you'll see that there was a Bank of England and a Bank of France. And all around, they began to develop these banks. And in America, it was called the Federal Reserve System. Go back and look at the 1900s, in the 1900s, 12, 13, 14. Look up names like Jekyll Island. Look up names like Felix Warbug and Paul Warbug. And look at the meeting that they had in those days, which came up with this meeting to come up with a central bank in America that would unite America with central banks in other countries. Then look at the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, which was then developed as part of the United Nations in the 40s. Then look at the Bank of International Settlement, which is the world central bank in Switzerland, which then leads you back up to the Paris Club, who is the keystone into controlling the IMF, the Bank of International Settlements, the World Bank, and the Federal Reserve systems, which in America have branches such as their regional Federal Reserves. For example, Chicago is the place for the regional Federal Reserve System in our region. I believe San Francisco is where the regional Federal Reserve System is for here. The New York has a Fed for the East Coast. And then all of those are culminated in the big Fed, which is now being chaired by Alan Greenspan, who is a trilateral commissioner, as is George Bush and many of those others.
But didn't we as taxpayers, did we vote on this? Or when did all of this
As a matter of fact, and that's an excellent analysis, is that the Federal Reserve System is a quasi-governmental agency. In fact, the people don't have an ounce of control over the Federal Reserve System. And one of the things that got John Kennedy killed was the first president who attempted to try to audit the Federal Reserve System. And they told him, no, you can't do that. And we witnessed how he wouldn't do it in Dealey Plaza. And you know, Marcus, I'm going to tell you the truth. Sometimes I ache at who does it to us. And many times the ones who do it to us are European people. But in reality, all Europeans ain't in on it. And I say it in my lecture. All white people are not in on the program for world control, else we wouldn't have witnessed whites victimized on the way to this world centralization. George Wallace wasn't a soul brother, but they shot him right down and took him out of the presidential campaign where he said it wasn't a dime bit of difference between the Democrats and Republicans. And they didn't want him to be that clear. They shot Lincoln Rockwell, who was an American Nazi. They shot the Kennedy boys. They shot White Nixon. They even shot Ronald Reagan in the belly. And when they shot Ronald Reagan in the belly, his wife didn't run out to the FBI or the CIA or the Naval Intelligence and get assistance in protecting Ronald Reagan. His woman turned to the horoscope lady, turned to things that most people don't understand and sought direction from the stars. Why would the president's wife seek direction from the stars and not from the military if the president was in control of the military? And that then shows, Marcus, that yes, you're right. We're not really chasing the presidents. We're chasing the hidden hand.
Watermelon TV. And, there you have it in his words. We're still chasing the hidden hand. So I don't want to hear about no black excellence from no Puff Daddy or all this senseless media coverage that these so-called entertainers and podcasters, Shaq and all that old dumb shit, those are the gatekeepers. Those are the one that's keeping our community in shambles. Where you got mothers uh killing their children. You have people um murdering their managers. I mean, just the behavior is crazy, and there's a reason why. It's not because black people are incompetent. Does this man sound incompetent to you? Of course he doesn't. So, we're just putting this out here because it needs to be spread. The information needs to be spread because Barack Obama ain't gonna tell you about the trilateral commission. He ain't gonna tell you about the Anglo American establishment. They not gonna mention these things. It's just gonna be some dumbass interview he did where he's, oh, boys need a bunch of homosexuals for friends. And then Michelle Obama sitting there, yeah, that's right. These people are sick. Welcome to the planet.
So that means that in this process of the hidden hand, there seems to be an enforcement wing aspect to it, Wallace. If they shot Bro, shot the thing, and on, the list goes. Uh, what type of mechanisms are used on the local levels that would facilitate this? In other words, we have an FBI, we have a Central
I'm
Intelligence
even
Agency.
getting tired of the damn conscious community. And I love Sinetta. This ain't no real shot. But it's like, man, we gotta, the Christian Hebrew thing, you can have shows forever, man. It's just like, man, we don't need to be discussing that no more. Just like our brother Ty said, um, this concept of God got us all fucked up. And we keep fighting over God and whose God is right. And we know one thing, we losing. So where do we go from here? We're going to keep putting the information out. But all that old Christian talk and all that old religious babble, Kirk Franklin and all that old weird shit, there's time out for that. Let's keep going. Listen.
Who are they reporting to?
That's a very good, Marcus, you're coming with just great questions, but I like the depth that we're going into because actually, though both of us know this, we're saying it to the people who are in the audience who are somewhat confused because they need this information. And that's the value of this show, which should be watched by everybody all the time because they can get this type of 3D reflection.
Mm-hmm.
The FBI, for example, which is leading the assault on black leadership all over the country, from Dinkins in New York to the Reverend Sharpton to Brother Louis Farrakhan, who's under attack by the FBI and George Bush, to the little punk Mayor Bradley, who's a trilateral commissioner and put his stock with the internationalists, but at the same time, they punish him when it looks like he's not delivering. They say, we want barricades on those streets. When they say, we want you to start spraying the people when he look like he's hesitating, then the FBI comes out and brings his pass out. Bill Gray was under attack. Harold Washington was under attack. Judge Hastings was under attack. Andy Young had been under attack. Everywhere we have leadership, some little peon like the FBI is sent to attack us. But when I first started to do my research, I read everything about the FBI because it was coming out in the church committee hearings of 75 that they were trying to stop the rise of a black messiah, which I thought was interesting because they weren't even out looking for a white one. Then I know that was the COINTELPRO program. Then we know there is a CIA, which had been prohibited from working in domestic affairs because we remember that the mafia, the little punk white boys who were pilfering prostitution, drugs, and others, were so respected by the Central Intelligence Agency that they got together and tried to go assassinate Castro, who overthrew crime and prostitution in Cuba. This thing seems as though the values are upside down here. Now, the CIA, who do they report to? Get a book called The Cult of Intelligence by Marx, M-A-R-K-S, and Marchetti, two Europeans who both had worked in and without of those agencies, who said that the Central Intelligence Agency actually takes its orders from the Council on Foreign Relations.
We're gonna stop right there just for a moment so I can show this book that we should start. I encourage people to get into, listen to the audiobook or listen to the or get the book and read it yourself. But this is some powerful stuff right here. I got my logo in the way. Hold on. One moment. But this is what we got to start doing, man. If we trying to get out of this mess, this is what we got to do. We have to inform. But yeah, the Anglo-American establishment pretty much tells why we in the condition we in and how we got here. So time out for I don't, that I'm putting all religious matters to bed. And I already said I'm God. And I already accepted that. I am what it is. In Kemet, they call it the netter. I am that. So, now it's time to uncover, like he said, peel back some of this debauchery that got our children shooting each other in the street. Watermelon TV, like and subscribe to the channel or dislike. All right. We're going to stop right there. This is just a test run. Fuck with me.